sis to sis.
Hi guys, welcome back to Sis to Sis. Nice to see you all. Today's show is going to be all about things that men and women, mom and dad, parents, agree and disagree on when raising children. It's a discussion we've been having a lot during this week, myself and Charlie, myself and my husband, and Charlie and herself. I think going back to school, going back to work, getting in a routine, there's been lots of things that have been popping up with the children, starting new ventures, and doing things. And there's just some things we just decided to talk about, which you might find if you have been brought up in a family or you're raising a family, that are the key things that you kind of maybe should have had a discussion about
prior to having or starting a family. Then I think when you get into dating with someone, you will ask certain things. Do you have a partner? What's your history? But there are so many fundamental things I think we need to ask going forward. If you are looking to settle with someone, date someone, how do you see growing up children? What do you believe about your religious beliefs? Children's education and things like that.
Definitely. I think in an ideal situation, because we said this when I asked my husband, like, what do you think would have been a better way? How can I start this kind of topic, talking to the audience about it? And he said, really, the key thing is don't rush. And we started singing like, don't rush.
Okay. Okay.
But it is. But I mean, myself, I had my children young with him. I didn't know, obviously, if our relationship was gonna last longer. So we didn't have these discussions. I think a positive thing is that I did meet his mom, his dad, so I knew where he was coming from, sort of upbringing wise, manners and respect wise. But not everybody does that, and if it is, we're going back kind of to old school ways, which is try and date someone, try and get to know someone, ask these questions like, what did your mum do when, or what did your dad do if you had done this, those are quite crucial. You don't think they're crucial initially because there's a connection with you and someone.
Yes, the chemistry
flowing.
The
chemistry is somewhat, you're head over heels, and those are not the kind of things that you kind of discuss in the first instance. But we're kind of encouraging you to have these discussions before you get into this situation.
Because I think sometimes if you have these discussions afterwards, the children become the pawn, or in between the battle over decision making, over what's best, or which parent believes what because of how they were brought up. So I think sometimes people avoid these conversations because of fear of destroying the dating process, of fear of destroying the relationship, when actually this is the foundation.
Yeah, of course. And I think there's nothing more. I think whether you live with your mum and dad as a child, or people are co-parenting separately, still there's nothing stronger than knowing that your mum and dad are saying exactly the same thing. Because children
a united front.
Exactly. Children will always find the gaps and try, and I wouldn't say play, not all the children will play one off against another, but they know where the gaps are.
Manipulation, whether it's mild, whether it's deep, it's still some sort of manipulation once they realise there's a weakness between the union.
And for good or bad, I think you both need to be singing from the same hymn sheet. And as I said, whether that's in the same household or you're co-parenting separately, you need to have these conversations so that your children know what is the real boundary, because children need boundaries to feel secure, to feel safe, and to go ahead and fulfill their full potential in life. Now
but also, sorry to interrupt you, don't think because you may have had your children young, or because you've had your children quite soon into a relationship, that you've kind of passed that point, so it's too late. You can still have these conversations now. We're not saying that if you haven't had them, you now can't. I think any kind of conversation that builds a united front, where people are singing from the same hymn sheet, whether prior, now, already having children, still needs to be had.
Yeah, definitely. I want to probably put this to, I think I asked Dale last night. I'm going to start with this one first. And I said, like, obviously we've parented together with our son and our daughter. He's also parented with his son's mother separately. So I said, what was the biggest thing that you find, like, how, kind of, what if you could talk and voice yourself on this topic, what would it be? And he said there was quite a few things that he wished he could have said, but because of feeling of guilt that he wasn't there, he didn't. And he said mostly it was to do with that kind of parenting boundary, like he even says it with me, like, I'm friends with my children, and that's something I quite pride myself on. But he's like, there's difference between being friendly and being friends. It's really not your number one priority.
Definitely
to
not.
be friends first. You have to be a parent first. And even in my line of work, I come across a lot of people who do not want to set boundaries for their children because they're scared of not being their friend. Where it is, in my experience with my children, I've learned that if they have set boundaries, they know when you change your tone. You know, you don't have to be scared of that. They need to know your mum or dad first, and then you know, you have a friendship within that. You are their playmate as well sometimes, but they need to have that clear definition, and you shouldn't be scared. They're gonna love you for you being a clear parent. What gets muggy is when when they don't know whether to take you seriously or not, whether your last word is your last word, or if they can do, you know, if it's all very flexible too much. Children feel very insecure
definitely.
in those situations.
I think even up until just maybe a few days ago, my daughter bought me a lovely glass that actually says "Always my mother, forever my friend," which thankfully the friend part came after, because as you said, I'm very big on being a parent first and foremost, setting boundaries, healthy boundaries. You know, sometimes it comes down to tough love also, but my first role to them is to be their parent, is to be their mother, their first teacher, pave the way and instill
manners,
everything that they need to be able to one day fly the nest and actually survive in this world,
and thrive,
literally both flourish, thrive, do all of that once they've sort of left. So yeah, I definitely think I'm also that. Be the parent first, but be the friend after. But we can have fun. We dance, we play around, we turn up the music, we do silliness, we do all that friendly stuff.
Have a laugh. I'm never saying like, don't, you know, you're disconnected with your children.
Oh,
like, no. But I think that you have to know that it's more important to be a parent than it is a friend, even though you want that friendship. But they have to know, as children, they have to know that you're a parent first and then friend, and you'll get a better relationship long term.
Definitely. I think very early on when I became a parent, as you know, I'm very much sort of into my spirituality, my star signs, astronomy and all of that. I think very early on I read a book that said Piscean mothers tend to be or try to be friends with their children more than they are parents, and the boundaries get blurred. I read that book with my first child, so I was adamant to not do that. I've made it my point to be their friend secondary, to being their parent. If that's in the stars, do you know what? I still have the power to redesign our destiny. So I've done the opposite of what the book said.
And I think like, you know, myself and my family, we watch a lot of wildlife as well. And we were watching like the Pride of the Lions, and you know, and how sort of,
and the wolf packs and
how
stuff.
the packs work, and how that kind of order of the order basically within a community, within a family works. And like, I think sometimes we try to come away from that, and really the design of us is to have that kind of pack order. And like I was watching, you know, the hyenas were non-threatened by the lionesses, and as soon as the lion came along, there was food for the lions. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
Because it is just the way nature.
Or even the
plans,
wolf packs, as we said. Sorry, you have the elders. The elders tend to lead the pack. You have the alpha who actually drives the pack. You have the sort of medium ones in the middle. There's an order of how things are supposed to go. As you said, within nature, we're supposed to look after our old. You know, the stronger are supposed to drive the rest forward. Nature, us as humans, are so intertwined with all of this. We are supposed to be sort of following those rules.
And I think we were made as the more intelligent species, but with other influences, it's kind of backfired. You know, like we need to go back to what we can see as the makeup of how to rear our children.
We've been so caught up in man's law then, so to speak, and we've come away from the laws of nature, from the universal laws, you know, and no matter what laws are made on the land, there are higher laws that govern over all of us, and that's what we've come away from. We've sort of bought into a lot of what's happening on the TV, what's happening on in society, and we've swayed from the very connection. Look where we're sitting today, look where our children get to enjoy, to breathe sort of air, to be at one, do some grounding, take off your shoes and do all of these things.
And you'd be surprised how many people don't, you know, like, just when they're outside, to look up at the sky and appreciate it. And these are things that, you know, you get together with someone, you have a children, you don't know what their diet's been like, you don't know how they feel about whether they're gonna be plant-based, whether they eat meat, whether they eat
ever
pork,
left London, like if they've ever come out with their city that they live in,
eat McDonald's every day. Do you know what I mean? Like, these are kind of discussions that, you know, if you don't want your offspring, your children, the next generation getting involved in or being indoctrinated in, have these conversations before you make a person the mother or father of your child.
And if it does destroy the dating or the relationship, then that person isn't meant to be the one. You're not supposed to have children with that person.
You can go at that point. Once the child comes, it's too late. You cannot, you know, you can't decide to leave at that point. You can't abort mission. Do you know what I mean? Like, at that point. So you can abort mission before you put in a third life into your scenario. So have the conversation.
Yeah, because I think even culturally, there are things, you know, sort of between maybe classes and races, whether it's hairstyles, haircuts, designs, cane row, ear piercing. There are things that seem so everyday, that seem just like, oh, okay, gonna go and get my son's ear pierced, but actually these are things that parents disagree on, whether it's because of different cultures or just because they believe certain things. There are parents who don't believe in cutting children's hair until a certain age. These seem, again, very minor, but actually these are things that can cause such friction between two parents in a relationship and over a child.
And definitely with the grandparents as well, because
definitely.
I remember having a few, like, me and my mother hardly ever disagreed, but the disagreements came when I had my daughter and she wanted to do certain things a certain way, and you know, in her defense, we were still under their roof, you know, under my mum's roof, under her roof. So we always have manners and respect, but being our child, we wanted to do things a slightly different way, and it could have caused more conflict between myself and my husband, but we didn't let it. We kind of tried to have the conversation, saying, you know what, this is the way your mum wants to do things, but she has her children, this is our children, and I'm going to have a respectful conversation with her about the things I agree with and the things I disagree with. And we kind of got round. It was a bit of a kind of sulking initially, and like, I want to do what you want with your pick with them, you know, kind of ways. But you know, she came around and she really, once she saw that we were on the same page about the things we were going to do with her, she did have a different respect for us, I think, because we had those discussions. We had an insight as into how we wanted her to grow up, sort of nutrition wise, diet wise, her routine, how the example we want to set for her as parents. So we did get that respect.
And you're not also going to agree on everything. I mean, obviously my eldest, my daughter, was baptized along with your son, same day and everything. However, my two boys were not baptized. That's something which in the beginning caused a bit of friction. Even our own mum was kind of a bit disappointed that I wasn't going to baptize the boys. Their dad was a little bit disappointed that I wasn't going to baptise them because I think of his upbringing. But then in the same breath, we've come to a common ground that that's what I believe, that's what I want for my children going forward. We've disagreed on things like, you know, ear piercing, when I've pierced the boys' ears quite early on then. And also sort of, you know, when they cut their hair. My youngest, as you know, has had a speech and language delay. Because it was such a traumatic experience to comb and plait and do his hair, it was affecting his speech further. So I made
whereas
the decision,
some people think that as your speech will be delayed if you cut your hair, do you see? Clearly, that was the same argument I had.
And that's what we've had culturally. If you cut your son's hair or your child's hair too early, that it's going to stunt their speech or what have you. My son already had a speech delay, and doing his hair was absolute torture. So I cut his hair. I did have sort of, you know, a few sort of comments from my in-laws about cutting his hair because maybe they weren't aware of the connection of why I had done it. It wasn't just a case of, I believe I want to cut my son's hair, so I'm going to cut my son's hair. I needed to lessen the trauma that he was going through to help with his speech. But again, hair cutting, all of these things, where they're educated, what courses they take, what profession they go into, exactly, what choices they make in high school.
There's so much that needs to be discussed, because as you said, you need to be on the same page, because children will know when you've got a clear path set out for them. I'm not saying they will necessarily go down that path, but if they need a foundation, and you create that foundation, and if you both are speaking the same language in regards to that foundation, the children will know in a direction. They'll be certain about the direction that's expected, having expectations for them as well,
aspirations
and aspirations for them as well. I can say that a lot of times parents disagree. This is what I've heard from friends of the family who have children who they no longer, maybe for whatever reason, don't live with the children's mother and the children, and a lot of the times they might, you know, give financial support, and they're very much on this thing like, I don't understand why she has to buy a name brand this or a name brand that. It's conversations I've heard a lot. I think a lot of people do disagree on like kind of
financial things and material
things, and whether your child grows up in without an aspect of materialism, or you want your child to only have the best. That's also a massive conversation, because some people didn't grow up having, so they like give their children whatever they want. And if your partner has not had that experience and wants to teach their child the value
as opposed to spoiling them,
the value of, and actually not even know the value of things, because I think in my case I didn't want my children to even, like, they had clothes that would last, but they didn't even know. It was just, it's a practicality. They had clothes, you know, they had long lasting clothes that I would buy, but it was never about, oh, you've got this or you've got that. And like later on in life, I guess, you know, they have their own friends and they have pairs that, you know, they want certain things. They
their own identity.
They have their own identity then. But when they're growing up, what they wore was never ever an issue to me. It was literally the practicality. I mean, they're clean, they're ironed. Do you know what I mean? They look nice. They're coordinated. There was not just throwing it on them, but actually that mentality of you have name brand on the top and nothing on the bottom, or you don't live anywhere but you've got name brand, like,
or a big car outside,
was
but the values
that was
that you're
a massive
instilling.
thing for me, and also for my husband. He wasn't growing up materialistically, but then when he had a child with someone, that was something that he didn't really factor for. Like, you know, I don't want to say too much because it's not fair. They're not here to represent themselves, but that kind of having material stuff. But when you're packing material stuff, it's in a black bag,
but then it's
not
like,
in a suitcase.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Look at us, sort of like, obviously at some point, you know, Mum became a homeowner and everything, and we understood that from the outside it looks like great, they're doing absolutely great, but then we understood the struggle from behind the door, as in, you know, mortgage needed to be paid, food still needed to be there, we still needed money for school trips. So we weren't materialistic, although we moved halfway in our life to an area that was somewhat deemed.
Yeah, I think people looking outside in think, oh yeah, they're right, or they think they're this, they think they're that. Like, we ate corned beef and rice for a lot of times. You know what I mean? We had to make
the struggle was real.
It was real, and it was because my mum could see where she wanted us to be. She could see a future for us, and it's really important that you get with someone who has the same ideals, the same values and ethics as you. So, is there anything else you want to touch on, like key elements? I did write a list. I sort of said the main things people disagree on is things like diet, food choices, education, gender roles, manners and how you discipline your children. Like, some people even call aunties and uncles all elder people, and that might be a thing. Like, I know that when I met my other half, he called his aunts and uncles by their first name, like standard. There was no auntie anybody. And I said, what my mum said is, you call your aunts and uncles by blood auntie and uncle.
Yes.
But my dad had it like every big person was aunt or uncle, and he would literally flick your lip, you know what I mean, if you forgot to say it.
I've now got, sorry to interrupt you, I've now got, well, I know people who would refuse their children to call anybody auntie and uncle. I think growing up maybe in certain places, or, you know, like there's an air of things that could go on, people that aren't your blood but you call auntie and uncle and auntie, there's this level of trust where your child then thinks that, that boundary, things can happen. And I think I know a lot of people who won't allow their children to call anyone that isn't blood, even a godparent. Like, you're not allowed to say auntie or uncle unless you are blood related. There are no lines to be blurred. So even there is such a difference in people's opinions. Like you said, there are some people who call their aunties and uncles by first name. There are some people who won't call close people aunties and uncles. There's so much differences in the world. As you said, conversations just need to be had.
If you can have them. If you can't have them before, have them quite early on, because you don't want to have these conversations in front of your children at the time when you're making the decision for them. Because that's just pair. And we're kind of just going to enjoy this day today, I think.
With the children,
because we're out here with them. They didn't. We did ask them if they wanted to have a little chat with with you, the viewers, about some things they've learned, what's been vital for them growing up and their parenting. But they got a bit camera shy last minute, so we're going to enjoy the rest of the day with them, enjoying this amazing view. We hope you're going to have a blessed week too. Stay blessed.
From Stanmore Country Park.
Like, share, subscribe,
hit the notification bell.
Love ya. Bye.